This is the Concealed Carry Podcast, episode number 389. And welcome to the Concealed Carry Podcast, part of the concealedcarry.com network. I am your host, Riley Bowman, and I'm joined today by special guest co-host, Brian McLaughlin, who, those of you watching the video feed, you see him there. Crazy guy that he is. What's up, Brian?
Hey, how's it going, Riley?
Glad to have you on with me today. Today's episode, a special one. This one's titled, You Carry a Gun, but What About Medical? And this is a lead-in to and ties in with something that we've got kicking off this week, which is a special trauma care summit that'll actually officially launch on Thursday. But the deal is you want to make sure you are signed up and registered for this right now so that you get all the emails and all the information as to when this summit kicks off. Basically, what's going to happen is we're going to release one episode, one training video, if you will, each day over the period of about 2 weeks. And each episode will be a different title or a different topic, and it'll be taught by none other than Brian McLaughlin right here. And it's going to be a really great time. The content, the training videos are completely 100% free. But the catch is they're only available to watch for free for 48 hours from the time that they're released. So that's why you want to make sure you're registered and watching your emails and watching those links as they come through so you can catch up, so you can catch those episodes as they're released. So hopefully you have a chance in that 48-hour window to watch them. They won't be very long. They'll be like 5 to, I think the longest one might be 15 minutes long. But most of them will be relatively short and digestible. It'll be a really great trauma care-based training summit. It's a training, series of training videos. So we're super excited about this. Sponsored by Mountain Man Medical. You can head on over to mountainmanmedical.com to see a whole new line of trauma care and medical kits and other products. And to get signed up for the summit, probably should give that link too. Go to concealedcarry.com/summit. concealedcarry.com/summit. So I've got Brian here with me. And Brian, I think we've had you on the podcast a time or two, and I think we've even talked about some medical stuff in the past. But for those that are not acquainted with you and who you are and your background, I think it's only fair that we give folks another chance to get to know you. So, Brian McLaughlin, former U.S. Navy Corpsman, former EMT. You've been through EMT school. And former ER tech. Is that right? Did I get that right?
Yep.
Oh, cool. And he's also our director of medical training here at concealedcarry.com. So we're super excited about that, and we're excited to be releasing these training videos. Brian, why don't you give folks a little bit more about your background? I mean, you spent some time overseas. Would you mind kind of setting the tone and kind of creating the context, if you will, that we will sort of operate within over the next 45 minutes or so as we talk, as far as why you're really passionate about trauma care.
Yeah. Well, I got my start, in the military. I was a corpsman, which is for any of the listeners out there that doesn't know what a corpsman is. It's kind of like a medic, but for the Marine Corps. The Marine Corps don't have their own medics, so they pull from the Navy. And it's kind of a long tradition for corpsmen to assist the Marine Corps, during their combat operations. And so that's what I did. I was a sailor by title only. I never set foot on a boat. I spent all my time with the Marines or working in a hospital in the ER. So I got a chance to start off my career in the military by working in the ER. And that's where I went to EMT school for the first time. I got a chance to bounce a lot of my questions off of ER doctors. Whenever we had downtime, I got a chance to talk with them about trauma and the best way to do that. So I got a chance to kind of cut my teeth on the trauma a little bit while I was working at the ER. And then I carried that on to the other schools and then the Marine Corps units when I was working there. So I got a chance to go through a lot of combat trauma management schools. Did a little bit of work with the International School of Tactical Medicine out there in Palm Springs. And then I deployed to Afghanistan, where I saw a decent amount of combat. Got a chance to see just about everything. and practice a little bit. You know, they call it practicing medicine because you never really get it right. but you just do your best. So I did a lot of that. Enjoyed my time. I had a good time with the Marines. They took good care of me, and I did my best to take good care of them. And so that's where a big portion of my passion comes for medical. It's an extension of combat, and I enjoyed that aspect of it. Being there when people need you, and knowing what to do, of course, is there's always that big question.
Yeah. So that's kind of funny, actually. To me, I don't mean to say that everything you just told us is funny, but it's funny to me that I just learned something new about you, which is that you've never set foot on a naval boat.
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, sailor by title only. That's what I say. I say it all the time. People just to say, you were just in the Navy. I was like, well, I mean, technically, yeah, but I never really set foot on a boat. They tried to make me go once, and I said, no, thank you.
Oh, okay. Is that how that works?
It's not unless you know the system, which I did.
Nice. So, I mean, so you've treated gunshot wounds, blast wounds, IEDs,
Knife wounds.
knife wounds. You've seen some crap.
Yeah.
So one of the major things, obviously, that's a concern for any medic and anybody that is, trying to prepare themselves for dealing with major trauma is obviously bleeding. Blood loss is, I mean, if you don't have blood in your system, in your body, then you don't get oxygen to the body and to the brain, and then everything shuts down, lights out, right? So, how critical was it to you as a Navy corpsman to be able to? I mean, I imagine you use tourniquets, right?
Yep.
Can you share with us like one story about a tourniquet use? Are you cool with that?
I'm cool with it. It might get a little gory. I don't know how gory I should get. I'm fine with it. It doesn't really bother me to talk about it. And I enjoy getting the information out there and kind of, I don't know, getting rid of some of the mystique around it. So as
Right.
long as you're okay with gory, we can do that.
Well, okay. So, folks, consider this your forewarning of what's about to come.
Yeah,
If you get way off in the weeds, I'll bring you back, Brian.
rein me in. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Uh, yeah, in the medical community, it's not that uncommon to talk about things the way that you're supposed to because you want to get that information out to as many people as possible. And if you keep, that kind of stuff bottled up, then, no one wins. So, well, we were in one particular instance, we were doing a push to contact in Afghanistan, and we had set up one of our other units was taking fire, and we were kind of moving in to assist them. And when we swept up to this berm, they didn't check the entire area. What they checked a good portion of it, but not enough to keep us all in one area. So they said, "Hey, don't go over there. We haven't checked that spot. Stay in this area." So we had a combat replacement that was coming in, and he was kind of new to the location, and he was kind of spun up. It's a good portion of the Marine Corps is, hoorah, get some. And he was excited to be in the combat, and he didn't pay attention to where he was going quite so well, and he wound up stepping on an IED right behind me. So I went up. I thought we had gotten a mortar dropped right on us. I didn't think it was an IED at the time because we were in place. We weren't moving around. And so I thought we had a mortar drop right on us. So I turned around, and one of my sergeants was, yelling corpsman up. So I couldn't see anybody. It felt like I was all by myself except for hearing my sergeant yell. And there was this huge cloud of smoke and dust. And so I go running into this smoke and dust, and I'm yelling for the casualty that's down. And I could hear him in there screaming, but I couldn't see him. And so I just ran to where I heard the screaming, and laying in the crater was one of the Marines, and he was missing his left leg. My memory gets a little hazy after a while. I can't remember if it was the left or the right, but he was missing one of his legs, and his arm was pretty messed up. And when an IED blows up, it blows up and out. And so it got his leg, but it also like took all of his gear, his plate carrier, and all of his magazines and everything on his chest, and just blew them all over the crater. So I went running up there, and then you jump on the casualty, and they teach us, you take your knee and you jam it into their femoral artery to try to slow down the blood flow enough while you're getting out your tourniquet. So I did that, and he was yelling at me to get off of him, and I was telling him to shut up. And my bedside manner at that point wasn't probably the best. I could have been a little gentler about it, but there's a lot of stress going on at that point.
Mm.
So I start getting a tourniquet on him, and I look up, and one of my other Marines is standing there watching, kind of in shock. And so I yell at him. I said, "Hey, get on that arm. Get a tourniquet on that arm." And so he kind of snaps to and starts getting a tourniquet ready and starts putting it on the casualty's right arm. And so I tightened it down nice and tight. And then I started getting my combat gauze, and he was missing his leg, but there was a decent portion of the bone still sticking out. And so I just crammed as much gauze down the hole as I could, and just packed it as full as I can get with as much combat gauze. And I could feel, the shattered bone there would catch on the skin of my hand. So I was trying to be a little bit careful not to cut myself. So I get that tightened down. I get it packed. I get a pressure dressing on the end of the stump, and the entire time I'm like calling over my shoulder to the sergeants, because there's a firefight going on the entire time that I'm working on this guy. And one of the things that the Taliban like to do is capitalize on an IED. You're down a guy, everyone's confused. You're trying to get a bird in the air and get your casualty out. So they'll try to come in and with close quarter fire and try to mess you up. So I was a little bit concerned about that. I kept shouting over my shoulder to my sergeant, asking him if we were good there or we needed to move. He said, "Don't worry about it, Doc. Keep doing what you're doing." So I said, "Good to go," and I just kept working. I got an IV started pretty quick, which I was proud of. I got good at IVs in the ER, and then getting a chance to do one in a firefight is a personal proud moment of mine. So I got him spun up and got him taken care of. Hit him with some morphine to help with the pain, and by then we had a bird fly in and pick him up, take him off to the hospital, and he lived.
Wow. That's crazy, dude. That's a crazy story. I can't even imagine picturing myself in a situation like that, on a battlefield, firefight with all that going on. What kind of tourniquet was it that you used? Just
It was
curious.
a soft T wide.
Yeah. Nice. That's what I carry. So now we've in the last, for a while now, we've actually stocked various medical and trauma kit supplies on our website at concealedcarry.com. But we've really been accelerating that and adding to our inventory there in the last couple of months here. Soft T wides are something that we hope to have added to the inventory soon, but not quite yet available for us on our site. But Cat 7 tourniquet is definitely on the site and available. We got SWAT T tourniquets. We got, that's really the two tourniquets, SWAT Ts and the Cat Gen 7s. That's crazy though. Soft TY did its job though, huh?
Oh man, I love the SWAT T. It's or not the SWAT T, the soft
Or
T.
that's what I meant. Yeah.
Yeah, the soft T. That's my favorite go-to if I'm treating someone else. I prefer the cat for self-application. I think it's a little bit quicker. But if I'm working on someone else, then the soft T is my favorite.
Yeah. Yeah. It just seems to me that it's so robustly built, and as you crank the windlass, I mean, there's just no give in that thing. Like know that you can keep cranking, and it's going to just keep tightening that thing down.
Yeah, this is a solid product. I got a chance to talk with some of those bubbas over there that produced the soft T while we were at SHOT Show, and I had a good conversation with them.
Yeah, yeah. So, tell us real quick. I mean, tell us about the importance of obviously having and using a tourniquet, but also especially where, I carry a little life hack with me all the time. Obviously it's there to use on anybody else that might need it, but tell us about the importance of being able to self-apply a tourniquet.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't have any help, you got to be able to take care of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And and one of the benefits of having a tourniquet already staged, having a purpose-built tourniquet is pretty important. I've been trained. I can make my own tourniquet if I have to, and I can make it so that it'll work. But the problem is it takes time to make a tourniquet. And a lot of people say, I'll just whip off my belt and I'll use that as a tourniquet. And you see that in the movies, and it might work in the movies, but in real life, that you don't really get enough pressure on the limb to do you a whole lot of good. For the most part, anybody that comes into the hospital with a tourniquet on their leg made out of a belt, they're probably not going to make it. So making your own tourniquet, having to improvise one, even if you're fast and you can make that tourniquet quick and you can finish it in 2 minutes, your patient can completely bleed out from a femoral artery within 2 minutes and 30 seconds. So you've just spent 2 minutes making a tourniquet, and now you have 30 seconds left, and hopefully there's going to be enough blood in the body of your casualty to keep them alive. You're cutting it close if you haven't already cut it too close already.
Yeah. I saw something recently that I thought was a pretty interesting statistic, and it said this actually from a presentation. I sent you a link. I don't know if you had a chance to check this out, but it was a tactical combat casualty care presentation of some sort, a TCCC presentation, a little slideshow.
Yeah, special operations.
Yeah, and it was on specialoperationsmedicine.org. Really cool little slide with all kinds of great info. But there's a statistic that's kind of buried down in there a little bit. It says in 2001, very few American combatants had tourniquets, and no one had hemostatic dressings with them. In 2018, no American combatant goes onto the battlefield without an IFAC that contains both. How critical is that, and how has that changed medicine in the field?
Well, I mean, it's changed it drastically. I mean, the whole point of a corpsman or a medic is to be able to take care of preventable deaths. And in combat and in a lot of emergency situations, there's a good possibility of there not being a preventable death. That no matter what you do, you're not going to be able to save that person. But if you have someone with a little bit of training and some gear nearby, there's the possibility that you can save someone's life with that gear. So when we started putting soldiers and Marines in Afghanistan and Iraq, initially there wasn't a whole lot of that. And it wasn't until special operations started to really pay attention to that we started to make a big change. And that's done a lot of good. And that's increased a lot of survivable wounds for the military, but anything that the military does, the civilian world tends to follow suit. So when you hear a lot of numbers about how tourniquets save lives, it's absolutely true. But you also have to remember the context where that data is coming from. So you've got soldiers and Marines who are wearing body armor, and they're primarily being injured by IEDs, so blast injuries. And since your core is so protected and your extremities, your arms and your legs aren't as protected, that's where you tend to take a majority of your wounds. So when you see how much good tourniquets do, they do that much good because of the situation, the location of the injuries, and the environment those injuries were taken in. As a civilian, you're generally not wearing body armor. I mean, some of our listeners might be, but for the most part, we're not wearing body armor. So you can take that wound anywhere on your body. And if you take one to your trunk or your neck, in a junctional area, your armpit or in your groin, tourniquet's not going to work. Yeah. So you're going to have something in place where you can take care of that wound when a tourniquet doesn't work. And that's where your quick clot and combat gauze and pressure dressings come into play.
Yeah. Now, of course, there are such tourniquets as referred to as junctional tourniquets, which are specialized tourniquets that are both kind of expensive, and in some cases really expensive, and two, not really practical to carrying, like in an IFAC. It's more of a specialized piece of equipment.
Right.
But probably actually wouldn't be a bad idea to know and be familiar with ways to apply pressure in some of those junctional areas of the body to reduce bleeding from those trickier locations. But again, that's something that's probably it's not really widespread knowledge. It's more specialized knowledge. Hey, real quick, I wanted to just talk about how it feels like to me in the last few years, 3, 4, 5, 6 years or so, that as I have been more and more in, well, I'm now in this line of work, meaning teaching people how to concealed carry, about self-defense, in this industry now full time for 4 years, 4+ years. And there's been this movement in the civilian sector for more and more people to be carrying things like tourniquets on them, to be carrying IFACs and such. That was not really so much a thing, not that long ago. And you look at how what we've learned in the training that has been developed from the military sector and what's kind of come, that's all just starting to kind of filter down now into the civilian sector, right? But you look at how recent even that has changed. Like back as recently as 1992, tourniquets were still strongly discouraged as like a general practice, if you will, in the military field, because they were afraid of like, causing damage to limbs and all this stuff, right? But it was, some of that was based on the thought process from way back in Vietnam, and even earlier than that tourniquets just, they were discouraged from use. And the crazy thing is, if you look at Vietnam as an example, that it was that extremity hemorrhage, so wounds in the legs, the arms, the limbs of the body, was the number one cause of preventable death in Vietnam. But at the same time, they were not really teaching to use tourniquets like they are today. And so it's been in relatively recent history that we've gone, wait a minute. Tourniquets actually are very effective, and they don't cause the kind of damage, that we used to think that they did. Medicine, of course, has advanced so much more. But now we're starting to see that start to filter to the civilian side of things. Like, hey, look what they've been learning in Afghanistan, Iraq, and elsewhere in the world. We should maybe consider to carry tourniquets on us, even just as civilians. I've had one on my person, or at least on a bag or something within reach of me for the last several years now, once I finally realized how important that was. Now, you made a great point, talking about how our military personnel are most likely wearing body armor, especially way more effective armor than even what our LEOs in the civilian side of things is wearing. LEOs are wearing soft body armor, not going to do as much, for say high velocity rounds from a rifle and such. Our military men and women wearing, like actual plates and stuff like that. So what that has resulted in is a lot, of wounds are going to be in the extremities. You brought up a great point that might be a little bit different in the civilian world. So that's a nice little segue into, we've just got done talking a little bit about tourniquets. Tell us about wounding to the trunk area of the body. So let's divide this up, because wounding in the body is treated a little bit differently if it's in that chest cavity, above the diaphragm, for instance, versus below the diaphragm. So tell us real quick about when someone's wounded above the diaphragm. How is that typically handled? What can we do, at least in the short term, as we're waiting for first responders to arrive?
Yeah, so there's not a whole lot that you can do for wounds to the chest cavity. You have to get that patient to a doctor as quickly as possible. There's not a whole lot you can do trauma at all, unless you're in a hospital setting. And the only thing that you can do is keep the patient alive for as long as you can to get them to a hospital. That's what's going to save their life. A corpsman or a doctor or a paramedic that is not in a hospital, that's all that they're worried about. They just want to transport that patient as quickly as they can. And the sooner that you can do that, the better. A lot of times you'll hear like the golden hour or the platinum 10, the amount of time that you should, you need to get that patient to a hospital. So the second leading cause of preventable death on the battlefield is going to be your tension pneumothorax. And that's what happens when you get penetrating trauma to the chest. You take a bullet to the chest, it punctures through into the chest cavity, and whether it hits the lung or not is not really what you're mostly concerned about. What you're concerned about is air getting into your chest cavity. And at first, a little bit of air is not that big of a deal. But every time that you breathe in, not only you breathing in air through your mouth, but you're also breathing in air through that hole in your chest. And what happens is that air isn't able to escape after it gets in. So you breathe in, a little air goes in, you take another breath, a little more air goes in, until air pressure inside of your chest builds up to the point where it begins to put pressure on your heart. That's what's called a tension pneumothorax, is when your heart is beginning to be compressed so much from that air pressure that it's not able to expand and contract like it needs to pump blood around your body. And basically what happens is you wind up having your heart not able to function correctly, and you die from that instead of actually bleeding to death.
You go into cardiac arrest.
Right. Yeah.
And it's not, we're not only concerned about air getting into the chest, out on the outside portion of the lungs, but also there's probably bleeding and other things going on inside that chest cavity, which means that there's fluids that are leaking into a chest cavity where they are not normally, right? Which that also adds to that pressure.
Yeah, that's called a hemopneumothorax, when you have blood in your chest cavity, and that added pressure increases the difficulty of the heart to pump adequately.
Yeah. So, a common way of at least temporarily treating someone with a penetrating chest wound like this would be to use a chest seal, right?
Yep, that's right. So that's pretty much the only thing that you can do to take care of that. As a corpsman, I was trained on how to do a needle decompression, where you take the if any of your listeners have seen the movie Three Kings with Ice Cube, a couple other people, I think George Clooney's in it. They have a pretty decent representation of what's going on during a tension pneumothorax, and in that movie, they use a needle thoracentesis to relieve that. And you can do that if you are trained by a professional on how to do it. Don't just try to do it on your own. Don't watch a YouTube video and then give it a shot. And generally, you only need to do that after, I don't want to give it like an actual number, but 20 minutes it usually takes for a tension pneumothorax to start putting your casualty in danger. So that's why it's the second leading cause, because you can get the patient to a doctor quickly enough. You can get that taken care of, and it's not that big of a deal. You treat the bleeding first, then you focus on treating that chest wound trauma if you can. So then you take that occlusive dressing, your chest seal, and you put that over the wound, and that just prevents air from getting into the chest cavity, more air from getting into the chest cavity, and continue to increase that pressure.
Right, and we've got really two types of occlusive dressings or chest seals. There'd be vented ones and non-vented ones. Can you explain kind of the difference between those and why we have vented chest seals, for instance?
Yeah, so a vented chest seal just allows air to escape if it can. When you breathe out, the pressure in your chest can change, and it can force a little bit of that air out and help to further reduce that problem of a tension pneumothorax. And it'll help to keep your patient a little more comfortable as well. But sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. If all you have is an unvented chest seal, absolutely use it. There's nothing wrong with that. And chest seals are fairly simple and quick to improvise as well. All you need is something that won't let air through, a piece of plastic or a piece of rubber, and some tape. You just tape that over the wound, and that should do a pretty good job of keeping extra air from getting into the chest cavity.
Right. Which is, one good reason if you have some kind of, tape at the very least in a kit, along with, you can take the wrapper from some other thing, like the wrapper from a piece of gauze, and tape that onto that chest in an improvised chest seal fashion.
Exactly. Absolutely.
Yeah, and that vent is key to allowing, and again, whether it's air or fluid to get out, it should allow both of those things to work its way through those vents. It's an interesting wound because you have a chest cavity that's supposed to basically be sealed, right? And you have a lung contained inside that chest cavity, and the lung is compressing and decompressing and compressing and decompressing as we're breathing in and out. And then all of a sudden you get wounded in that lung area. Let's say something passes through a bullet, or it could be any sort of impaling wound that penetrates both that chest wall cavity and that lung, and you have the opportunity for air to get into that cavity through the wound itself, but also you have a punctured lung that is going to allow air and things to escape from that lung inside that cavity. And that's why we get that there that and then what's happening is air ends up inside the cavity but outside of the lung and starts, that lung basically collapses to a degree, and then we get more and more and more air and fluid and all that building up potentially too, and voila, you get the recipe for cardiac arrest. I had the unfortunate pleasure of of crushing a number of ribs and puncturing my lung. I didn't have a penetrating wound through the chest wall, but definitely had other issues going on inside the chest. As that lung was injured, there was bleeding and fluid loss and all this stuff, and I kind of felt what that experience like to not only lose half of your capacity to breathe, but also I could feel things in my chest getting tight. And I didn't really realize, just how, I knew I was hurt bad, but it was later as I was talking with the doctor who was explaining all this to me, saying, how he explained basically everything you just explained, as far as how all that pressure can build up. The heart starts, having to work harder. It's under, it's being pressured or compressed, in ways that it's not used to. And eventually, he's like, you got to get that fixed,
Mm-hmm.
or you're going to die. And it's a pretty scary thing to experience. I'll just say from firsthand experience, it was not fun. I do not wish it upon anyone.
Yeah, and a lot of people think that it's because, if you take a bullet to your chest, your risk of death is from, your lung being punctured, and that's concerning, and you should definitely get that taken care of. But that's probably not what's gonna kill you. Lots of people live with only one lung. That's you can do that, and you can survive, well enough from just one lung. So that's not usually the issue. The issue is, that extra pressure on the heart.
Yep. Cool. All right. So these are two things that are in absolutely every one of my kits: a tourniquet and chest seals. I'm pretty sure that you're the same way, Brian. I mean, those are two things that, especially in, so often our minds probably, we think about all these horrible things that could happen to us or to our loved ones or people that are near and around us in our day-to-day environment. And we, like say an active shooting, let's go worst case scenario. We have this mass casualty event, and there's all these people now with bullet wounds in legs and arms and hands, in chests and other parts of the body. And it's like, well, okay, I can get a tourniquet on an arm, I can get a tourniquet on a leg, I can apply pressure, in the case of a wound, to the lower abdomen, right? Again, that's another thing that there's not a whole lot we could do in the field, but we want to get pressure on that, maybe get some gauze applied and get pressure on that area of the abdomen, try to, keep the blood loss to a minimum as much as possible, right? But then that chest cavity piece, I think, is something that is often overlooked, and yet here, we're to this point where I don't go anywhere without having a kit with at least tourniquets and chest seals. You did a great job, by the way, right? You wrote an article basically talking about that, about how, people should have like more chest seals, and there should be more emphasis on that sort of thing.
Yeah, especially for active shooter situations. I did a little bit of work with faith-based organizations and training up some of their security staff for being able to respond to an active shooter event. And that's one of the things I always tried to make sure that I told every church that I worked with. It's great to have tourniquets. Definitely need to have tourniquets, but that's not all you should have. Especially if you're putting a kit in your range bag or something like that. Having a way to treat penetrating trauma to the chest is important.
Yeah. It's a great article, and folks, if you want to go reference that, it's on the concealedcarry.com site. I don't know if we have a link handy for that. We have a couple of links I'll hand out as we go through this, the rest of this episode with Brian here.
Yeah, if you just search tourniquets on the website, it'll pop right up.
Yeah. And you actually just recently published another article, and let's touch on this real quick, Brian. Recently, like yesterday, I think it was, published this article about fake tourniquets.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us, kind of what's the deal with tourniquets, especially fake ones, what to look for, and why this is even an issue in the first place.
Yeah, well, tourniquets work pretty good, and a lot of people want to buy them. And some unscrupulous companies don't bother to make good products, and they just put out something that looks like a cat tourniquet, and it is in no way, shape, or form. I suppose in shape and form it is, but it's not even close to a cat tourniquet. And I decided I was going to do a little bit of testing on it. I wanted to see if how quickly they would break in comparison with a cat tourniquet. So I got a log
Yeah.
and I put them on the log and I cranked it down on the log as tight as I could go. And the cat tourniquet, I cranked it down. I got 2 full turns out of the windlass before it wouldn't go anymore. And then I tried to see if I could move it or shake it around or if it was at any risk of breaking whatsoever. And I put a decent amount of pressure into it. I weigh 250 pounds. I'm 6'2". I could get a little bit of pressure on that tourniquet, and I didn't have any issues with the cat tourniquet at all. Then I took one of these counterfeit tourniquets that I got off of Amazon from an unscrupulous company from overseas, and I put it down on the log. And not only did it take 8 turns for me to get it tightened down, but it also broke. And I tried a couple of different tourniquets to make sure that I wasn't, putting any undue stress on just one, and they each failed at a different location. And then I got ready to start writing the article, and then I said, well, hold on. Now I expected this tourniquet to break. I wasn't
Mm.
expecting it to hold up to the cat. So when I got that result, that's the result I was expecting. And I thought, well, man, that could be a little bit unfair. What if it might not be the best tourniquet, but maybe it would work in a pinch? If it's all you had, could you use that to stop bleeding if you were stuck?
Hmm.
And so I didn't have any more tourniquets left because I broke them all. So I ordered another one and waited for it to come in. When it came in, I put it on my left arm, and then I cranked it down until I cranked it down 8 turns total. And after every turn, I would check my pulse to see if I still had a pulse. And after 8 turns, I still had a pulse to my radial artery.
Yeah.
So, and then on top,
Wait, hold on. You said after 8 turns?
yes, yeah, after 8 turns, I kept turning it, and after every time, I'd set it in place, and then I check, and then I'd turn it again, check, turn it again, all the way to 8. The tourniquet didn't break, but after 8 turns, I could still feel my radial pulse.
Dang.
One of the
That's
biggest
wild.
problems, though, one of the biggest problems is that because I was turning it so much, occasionally it would slip, and then it would just and unwind a
Hmm.
couple of turns, and then I'd have to grab it and then try to go back past that again. And so even if at the end of that, even if I did have an occluded artery, because it took too many turns to turn it, not effective, not even a little bit. If I was bleeding profusely, I would be saying some very, very bad words very
Yeah.
often and very
Yeah.
loudly, because that would be extremely frustrating.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So actually, you and I, we were doing some filming for this summit, for these summit videos the other day, and we have a training tourniquet that we were using for part of that. And the truth is, the training tourniquets, and I'm actually okay with this. I think it's okay to buy the knockoff training tourniquets for training use, because I don't necessarily care as much about getting, for training purposes. I mean, the whole point is in your understanding, in your mindset with regards to tourniquet use, the idea is that you get the tourniquet on, you want to get that initial tightness as tight as you can, right? And then you start winding, and you stop winding a tourniquet when the bleeding stops,
Right.
right? That's the general rule, right, Brian?
Hmm.
Um, you know, in training, when I'm just doing the practice, going through the motions of this, there's still quite a bit of tightness to that windlass. You're still going to feel a lot of pressure on your arm or on your leg. You may not get complete occlusion in those vessels and arteries in your arm or leg, but I think it's still a valid tool to use in training. But that would be my one context. And I think you said something to the same effect, that that you that's basically what our intent is to eventually provide some training tourniquets available on our site. And those might not necessarily be the authentic full, Gen 7 cat tourniquets, but just for training purposes. But they'll be identified in a blue color as opposed to our real. And I think all training products in the medical community typically are blue. We see that with the SWAT T tourniquets, even with the soft T tourniquets, and so forth. But anyway, that practice is really key, though.
Yes, yeah, I completely agree with that. You don't want the first time that you put on a tourniquet to be in an emergency.
Yeah.
And a lot of people will say, well, why don't I just use the cat that I just bought? I paid $30 for this thing. Why don't I just practice with that? And the reason is that tourniquets and a lot of trauma equipment is generally a one-use thing. You start to lose some of the effectiveness of the tourniquets when you reuse them often. So if you're putting them on, a couple of times and learning how to use them correctly, there's the possibility that it's not going to be as effective. So you don't want to use the tourniquet that you're going to use to save your life or a loved one's life to practice with. And since and we've got these cheap blue tourniquets, you're not going to pay the full price for that you would pay for a cat. You just, if it's blue, you don't put it in your medical kit. That's for practice only. Use that so when you're teaching your family how to stop blood loss, then they can use that to learn.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, it's a really great point. And so, anyway, we were practicing with that training one, right? And you could definitely tell, though, that I could sense that I could keep cranking that, and the more I cranked it, the more I felt like it was just going to break, and I didn't really want to have this thing all tight on my arm and just have it all of a sudden snap.
Mm-hmm. Just flex those guns a little bit, pop it right off.
And then we went right over to and there was a genuine, SWAT T training tourniquet. The SWAT T is the big, fat, elastic band that, the idea there is that you just start winding that thing around. Every time you pull it around, you want to pull it tight again. And it's got the little, like, oval shapes and circular shapes and diamonds and squares, and you're trying to turn squares into diamonds and diamonds into squares and ovals into circles and circles into ovals. If that makes sense. It makes a lot of sense, actually, when you look at the little diagramming that's printed on the surface of the SWAT T tourniquet. But I had the realization after the fact, after we did some of that training, Brian, that the reason why that SWAT T was so much more effective than the blue training fake cat tourniquet was because it was an actual tourniquet and the fake one was not doing its job.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I got that SWAT T on, and I'm like, oh, yep, hands turning purple here,
Yeah, the SWAT T is a great option. The only problem that I have with it is that the way you secure it is by tucking it under itself. A cat or a soft T wide, they've got locks in place where you can lock that tourniquet down so it doesn't come loose. If the tourniquet comes loose, that's a bad day. You're gonna have a bad day. So you want to make sure that it's always in place. And the SWAT T, you tuck it under itself, and it'll stay there pretty fine. The problem is that in an emergency, you might need to go places, and when you move the casualty or you move yourself, there's a risk that it could come loose and stop doing what it's supposed to. So if it were me and I was going to use the SWAT T, which I think it's fine to use it as long as you secure it well and you're always paying attention to it and make sure that it's doing what it's doing. And if I've got the option, in Afghanistan, I would carry around a big roll of duct tape. If I had to use a SWAT T, I would put a loop of duct tape around it, kind of keep it in place, make sure it's not going to go anywhere while we're running around doing our stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Good stuff, man. Now we had a question. Actually, I want to go back to this. Jared asked about. It's a really great point that he makes. Would you say that the majority of injuries in the civilian world where a tourniquet comes into play would not be gunshots, but more likely work or automobile injuries?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you can get a wound no matter what you're doing. You're doing a home improvement project, you slip with the utility knife and open up a trench on your arm. That's a good possibility of, we had someone associated with the company a little while ago. I don't know if you remember who, but she fell off of a ladder while she was cleaning her gutters, caught her arm on a piece of metal, and she had to break out her own tourniquet to take care of herself. So,
that was Eve Flanagan, who was a contributing writer to our site for a time. And yeah, I don't. She was doing something on her. Kind of, she has like a farm slash ranch. Yeah, exactly. She just. Oh, I saw actually the scar. I spent some time with her at an event this last November, or September, and yeah, nasty, nasty scar. Like she really ripped up her arm bad.
Hmm.
So it was really cool that she had a tourniquet right there with her. She just was able to throw that on, and whether it was actually really needed or not, that's kind of beside the point. I know she was bleeding badly. I don't think that she was alone, working alone. She's kind of somewhat removed or remote location from a hospital. I don't think she even questioned it. Just oh my gosh, I tore myself up. I'm bleeding really badly. Got that tourniquet on quickly, and then just drove herself to the hospital. All is
Hmm.
well.
Yeah, and it's better to use one and not need it than to need it and not have it.
Yeah.
And that's why it's important to have. I like to tell people you need to have a kit in multiple locations. You know, um, if you have multi-story home, having one on each level. Because if you break your leg in the basement, do you have to crawl up 3 flights of stairs to go get to your medical kit? It's important to have one in your car, have one in your wife's car, have one if you have kids of driving age, having one in your kid's car, and then making sure they all know where it is as well. You don't just sneak it in there. Let them know where it's at and make sure they know how to use what's in it. Um, one of the things that a lot of people don't realize is that if you fall down and you break a bone, especially a femur, that jagged end of the bone is very sharp and it can slash through your
Yeah.
femoral artery pretty easily. So even if you don't have an open injury, there's enough space inside of your leg that you can bleed to death from an unopened femoral fracture. So being able to have a tourniquet on standby and being able to apply it quickly is important. And having one that's already made, if you're like E. Flanagan and you cut open your arm, you might not have the use of a hand to improvise your own tourniquet. So it's important to have one
Yep.
already.
Agreed. I really like Dan's comment here. I need to get a med kit.
Yeah, yes, you do. Get two.
The good news is that's why we're making a big deal out of this, and we're talking about this, and obviously, this is somewhat of a advertorial, if you will, an infomercial to some degree. I mean, we're talking about really important stuff here, but we're also trying to promote the fact that Brian here as our instructor, I'm in there a little bit just for a few little things here and there, but these training videos that we're releasing this week. Really, really important content, guys. I mean, if you want to learn more specifically about how to correctly apply things like tourniquets or chest seals or compression bandages or that sort of stuff, like, and there's a lot more than that. By the way, Brian's worked really hard on putting together all the content, on writing this all up, and we've been working to get all this filmed and ready to go. That's because it's really important to us that we get this information out there. Our hope is that it makes a difference in somebody's life somewhere, that it saves somebody's life out there somewhere, potentially. And then also, it's been a big goal of ours. We've worked really hard to secure the absolute best pricing in the industry that we can on name brand quality components to then source and buy and put together our own trauma kits at concealedcarry.com. Now, this is through a new venture called Mountain Man Medical. MountainManMedical.com is a whole new company, new business line, and all focused on trauma gear, kits, medical equipment, all this stuff. And right now it's pretty simple and straightforward. We basically have two kits. The Sweetwater kit, which is a kind of an entry level essentials kit. It's got it's got a SWAT T tourniquet in it. It's got a compression bandage. It's got gauze. It's got tape. Or ACE bandage. It's got gloves. It's got trauma shears. All this stuff, right? Well, I shouldn't. That's kind of the core of it. Now in the Yellowstone kit, you get the stuff like Quick Clot. You get chest seals. You get a couple other things, extra gauze and things of that nature. And then with both of these kits, you have the option of upgrading that SWAT T tourniquet and adding to the kit a Cat Gen 7 tourniquet. This is the latest generation cat tourniquet made by North American Rescue, a name that everybody should recognize if you know anything about tourniquets. North American Rescue, who's the company that makes the the CAT tourniquet, combat application tourniquet. That's what it stands for. So these kits, here's the thing: you got the Sweetwater kit and the Yellowstone kit. Both names, by the way, inspired by bodies of water, or I guess you could even think about Yellowstone National Park if you want to. But both bodies, Sweetwater River, the Yellowstone River, Yellowstone National Park. These are kind of areas in that mountain man region, that's so embedded in our historical lore about wild frontiersmen and mountain men and so forth. That's kind of the inspiration of all this. And by the way, to that point, we liked this name Mountain Man Medical because these mountain men would go out on their own for weeks and months at a time, sometimes completely by themselves, as they were run these various trap lines, trying to, the big thing was these beaver pelts, right? They're trying to capture all these beavers because that was the big selling hot ticket item at the time. And they'd be gone for weeks and months at a time by themselves. They were their own first responder. And many of them did perish, unfortunately. And many of them suffered severe wounds and injuries and illnesses and all sorts of things. And they had to learn how to take care of themselves. They had to learn how to fix themselves up, bandage themselves, put themselves back together. They learned a lot from the Native Americans, the Indians at the time as well. Learned these ancient healing remedies and different things. And so we were really inspired by that whole kind of story, if you will, about mountain men, and hence Mountain Man Medical was born. So the Sweetwater kit, the Yellowstone kit, there's going to be other kits and other things that come down the road, but right now we're launching with these two basic but essential and awesome trauma kits available at mountainmanmedical.com. And again, there's some special offers and opportunities if you want to go ahead and sign up for the free summit, concealedcarry.com/summit. That's where you do that. And there's an opportunity to buy those same kits too, as well as you're going through that process of registering and all that. It actually says right there, hey, do you want to just buy one of these kits right now? Before the summit begins, you have that option entirely. And then these will be getting shipped out just as quickly as we can, kind of towards the end of the launch period here. So we're really excited about this whole venture, and Brian has been the guy that's sort of led the charge on our end here, with your expertise and, kind of, Brian, you have personally tell us real quick, kind of give us a quick overview, your own take, if you will, on these kits and how you've vetted everything personally that's in those kits.
Yeah. Well, I've got a lot of experience using the stuff that's in it. And a lot of there's a lot of small details that most people aren't going to notice that are important to me. A lot of things for efficiency and for overall, I don't know. I guess overall, it's going to make your life easier. For example, we have an elastic bandage, basically like an ACE wrap, and in the kit, a lot of other companies will put in some of those elastic bandages that have those little nasty little clips. Use those to keep it in place. I've used those a lot before, and those are no fun to use in an emergency. You tear it open, and those little clips, they go flying. You can't find them in the tall grass, and you're trying to work on someone who really needs the help, and you don't have what you need to get the job done. And so, as a result, I really wanted to include a type of elastic bandage that has hook and loop. So that way it'll secure on itself. You don't have to hunt up those little clips. You don't have to worry about losing them or having them fall off. You can just secure it with the Velcro, and it'll stay in place. So there's a lot of little things in the kit that I paid really close attention to. So you're getting the benefit of my experience using this stuff. And while you might not notice the little details, it'll make your life easier in the long run.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's such a great point. I appreciate you for pointing out some of those little details that a lot of times, I'll be honest, I didn't even really think about that, or that was something I didn't really think about. I think I was aware of the little metal clip style of ACE bandages. I think everybody's used those, and I think I knew about the Velcro ones, but to put that thought process into it and actually think, we're going to source these, even if they're a little bit more expensive, not by much, probably, by the way, but just because it's that much easier to use, particularly when you're under stress. And that's I think really important. I mean, Brian, because of your experience in the field, on the battlefield, literally patching guys up, fixing guys, trying to keep them alive until they could get extracted and back to a proper hospital. You know a thing or two about working efficiently, working quickly, working under pressure and under stress. And so it's been such an honor to me to be associated with you through this whole process as we've been working on getting Mountain Men Medical put together and getting all this off the ground. I've learned a lot, just hearing that perspective from you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I give it my best. That's I see this as an extension of taking care of my Marines, and my reputation with my Marines was very important to me, and I see this as an extension of that. So
Now, I'm sure you'll relate to this comment from Matthew. Ace bandages? You don't need no stinking ace bandages. Take a Motrin and change your socks.
that's right. Change those socks. That'll fix everything.
Matthew forgot about drink some water, though, too. Isn't that like the classic corpsman advice is take a Motrin, drink water, change your socks?
Yeah, that's all they teach us. We don't learn anything else.
But it's amazing how much that actually fixes, right?
Yeah.
Because probably the most common things you're running into, guys just having some various pain or whatever, so take some Motrin. Guys are dehydrated, drink some water. And you told me a story once about a dude that got, I think, was it some jet fuel or something on his socks, and he didn't change them for a while.
Yeah, that was
How'd that
a little
turn out?
not so good. He left a good portion of his feet in his boots when they took them off. Yeah, it was grody. It was grody. Well, the reason why they say corpsmen only say that is because Marines are a bunch of whiners, and that's all they really need to do to take care of themselves.
Take a Motrin, drink water, change socks.
Yeah,
Hey,
yeah.
advice for life right there. It sounds like really wise advice. I wanted to point out that there's okay, real quick. We touched on it, but I wanted to make sure I provided the link. Talking about fake tourniquets, the importance of avoiding fake tourniquets. If you want to read the article that Brian wrote, it's a really great article. Go to concealedcarry.com/fake TQ, FAKETQ, concealedcarry.com/fake TQ. Really great article, good information contained therein as far as like how to identify fakes versus real tourniquets, the genuine. It seems like it's the cat tourniquets that seem to be the ones that are most copied and that counterfeited. There we go. I knew there was a word somewhere coming out from the brain. Just took a minute to get from the brain down to the tongue here. Also, another article here that I think is worthwhile. Brian is just looking at. We did a whole survey too, compiling a bunch of data from people that responded to this survey. The link for this is concealedcarry.com/are you prepared, and that's not. It's spelled RU, like the letters R and U, and then prepared. And if you go to that article, it kind of goes over a lot of the survey data that we compiled as far as where people in our audience currently stand as far as their information, their knowledge, their training, some of the gear that they carry with them, that sort of stuff. Was there anything that came out of that data that was either surprising or changed your opinion? Or, I mean, like, what were some of your takeaways from that data?
Yeah, the biggest thing that I saw was that a good portion of the people that frequent our website is that they've had some kind of training in the past.
Mm-hmm.
They've, a lot of people, the Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts or, whatever it is, you get some training somewhere. And a lot of people were saying that they've had training, but it's been, within 5 years ago and more. Like some people were saying that they haven't had any training for 20 plus years. And something that always sticks out to me is that medical is a perishable skill. If you don't use it, you will lose it and you will forget it. No matter how closely you follow that stuff, I haven't been working in a hospital for quite a while, and I can see that I'm starting to lose that stuff. So I have to brush up on it and constantly make sure that I'm up to date on the latest and greatest. So if you haven't had any training in a while, you need to get some more, and you need to revisit that training often. You don't have to, watch the videos that I'm putting out. Obviously, you could if you wanted to, but there's a lot of other places where you could go and get medical training. The Red Cross is a decent place. They're doing the Stop the Bleed campaign. So no matter what you do, get something and learn it, and then keep learning it.
Yeah, that's such a great point. Uh, we talk all the time about how firearm skills, shooting skills are perishable. Well, arguably, this whole medical component, this whole medical piece, is more important than knowing how to use a gun, because all of us are far more likely to come upon a situation where some sort of medical response is needed, even if it's short term and in the interim. I've personally responded. Not being on duty to, as far as like during my time working in law enforcement, just as a civilian, I've responded to multiple pretty severe car accidents, and some of which had some pretty bad bleeding and things going like that going on. So, that is much more likely to be something that you experience in your life where you need good knowledge, education, and training combined with good quality gear potentially to save a life.
Yeah,
And
I think
and so make sure your training's up to date.
yeah, I think one of the worst feelings in the world is seeing someone that's very hurt and you not knowing what to do for them. Sometimes you can't do anything for them, but standing there and watching, someone who's hurt, especially if it's a loved one, and not knowing what to do for them is a pretty terrible feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And just a little bit of
Yep.
training. Trauma medicine's not difficult. It's not. They let guys like me do it, so it's not that hard. Anybody can learn it. There's just some key things that you have to pay attention to and remember, and having some equipment nearby will help you do that.
Yep. Yep. Matthew, who is a viewer on Facebook with us today, makes a great point. Stop the Bleed are courses that are available all over the place. There's been a huge movement to get these out there to the general public in a big way. If you can find a Stop the Bleed course nearby, I would encourage you to do that. You can go to Stop the Bleed. I think it's stopthebleed.org or stopthebleed.com. Maybe both of those links work. And find a class that's near you. Very basic overview type stuff. They don't go super in depth, but as far as applying a tourniquet and other just basic life-saving measures that anybody can learn to do over the course of a few hours. Really, really simple. Not even that sometimes. Stopthebleed.org is the official link, so you can go to stopthebleed.org and find training up. There's opportunities just about anywhere that you might be. Somewhere fairly close to you, you can find one of these classes. I've been through a couple of these classes. I've also been through quite a bit more advanced first aid training. I had the opportunity of attending a multi-day first aid trauma medicine course where we got all the way into packing wounds and applying tourniquets. Of course, that's relatively basic. Chest seals, working with quick clot and other hemostatic agents. It was a wonderful course that really opened my eyes, gave me a really fantastic foundation for me personally. And it was an expensive course. Don't get me wrong. It was actually paid for by my employer at the time, which I was very thankful for. But if you had the opportunity to take a class like that, man, I'll tell you, it's life changing. I had the unfortunate opportunity, if you will, of being in that situation like you sort of described a moment ago, Brian, where I was in a situation as an 18-year-old kid responding. I came up on a pretty bad accident involving a young girl on a motorcycle, one of those small like mini bikes, and she'd been hit by a full-size pickup going full 50, 60 miles an hour. It was bad.
Yeah.
And I felt so hopeless in that moment. And we were, minimum 15 minutes, if not 20 minutes or more from help arriving, and it was a terrible, terrible feeling of that hopelessness. I was a Boy Scout when I was younger. I had been through some training, but I realized in that moment that the stuff I had learned in Boy Scouts, maybe I wasn't paying attention enough. I don't know. Maybe it just wasn't enough. I don't know. I didn't feel prepared. I felt so useless in that moment. And I vowed at that very moment that I would not be hopeless like that again. And I started attending I've attended numerous forms of medical training since that time, since I was 18 years old. From your basic CPR, first aid, AED, to, the more advanced courses like I was able to take a few years ago. So, guys, I I cannot emphasize enough how important this is. But guess what? We have this free opportunity that you can make use of with some really great high quality informational content through our summit starting this week. It starts on Thursday this week. Concealedcarry.com/summit. Make sure you go sign up. Do it right now. As soon as you're done listening to this podcast, or even hit pause and come back and finish this episode. We're actually about done here, but make sure you get signed up, okay? Because I think you're going to really benefit from this training course. Plus, kind of going back to what I was saying about our new Mountain Man Medical line of trauma kits and gear, is it was really important to us to try to source all of the components, all the parts, the pieces, the supplies as inexpensively as we could, but still have it be good quality stuff. And then pass that along to you guys. So I will put up our first aid trauma kits against anybody else's out there in the industry, especially when you look at price. Getting good quality name brand components in your hands for substantially less, and in some cases a lot like more than half off from some other competing companies and their products out there. I will put our kit up against those kits, especially for the price. We're talking everything we're selling is pretty much under $100. I think if you add the Cat 7 tourniquet to the Yellowstone kit, it ends up being just a little bit over $100. But we're talking a fully stocked kit with quick clot, chest seals, tourniquets, two tourniquets at that point, by the way, because you add the Cat 7, you still get the SWAT T included in it. Gloves, trauma shears, permanent marker, compression bandage, 2 rolls of gauze, elastic bandage or wrap. Am I missing anything, Brian?
You said chest seals, right? Yeah. I think you got up most of it there.
I mean,
I'm having
that's
a
a
hard
ton
time
of
paying
stuff. I'll tell you, quick clot alone is like $30, and that's included in that. So keep that in mind. Quick clot alone, like $30. The tourniquet alone, like $30. It's like $60 of your kit cost right there, and we're still barely selling the total kit with Cat 7 tourniquet for just over $100.
Yeah, if you try to buy everything that's in the kit yourself, you're gonna pay more. So,
Yep.
We put it together for you, and we got some training for you. It's a pretty easy deal for me.
Yep. And Matthew asking about offering the Trauma Care Summit at NRAM 2020. Not there, but actually at the Concealed Carry Expo. We'll have a whole booth set up, and Brian will be there actually teaching basic trauma aid classes right there in the booth at the Concealed Carry Expo.
Yep. Come and ask me some questions. I'll be there to answer any questions. You got anything that you want to know about being a corpsman or anything like that, feel free to come up and ask me.
Yeah, that'll be a great opportunity. So, folks, if you're able to be in Kansas City, what is that, March 20th to the 22nd, we'll be there. We'll have our broadcast booth there, broadcasting live from the show. We'll have this medical booth. Jacob and I will be presenting seminars while we're there. The Concealed Carry Expo will be a great opportunity to connect with us, find us, hit us up, attend some of this free training that Brian will be putting on. It's going to be awesome. Looking forward to it, brother.
Yeah, me too. It's going to be a fun time.
Yep. So we better wrap it up. We've actually gone a little bit more than an hour here, which is longer than I expected. But, great stuff that I think we talked about here today, Brian. I appreciate you and your expertise and lending that to us here today.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me on. I had a great time.
Awesome. Well, folks, one last call. Make sure you head on over to concealedcarry.com/summit. Make sure you sign up for this free training event. And, hey, I think after listening to this today, you may be sitting there thinking, I need to get, at the very least, just one of these basic trauma kits. Hey, maybe you think you want to get one for your car or multiple cars, your home, maybe something to carry with you. I mean, the little pouch these come in is a great little pouch with MOLLE webbing and straps and things, so you can attach this to other bags. It's relatively, we also, there was a lot of thought that went into, I wish I actually had one here with me so I could show those of you watching on camera. A lot of thought went into the design of this pouch to fit everything compactly so it was not unnecessarily large. It's a great little compact kit that has so much in that little kit. So...
Yeah,
anyway.
I like the bag a lot. The bag was really important to me, especially, spending a lot of time in Afghanistan and out in the field. You have to have a decent bag, especially with good zippers. The zippers are always the first thing that fails on me, and I've gone through a lot of trauma bags, and I'm hoping that we're putting out a really great kit with a great bag with it.
Awesome. Thanks again, Brian. So, folks, we're going to let you go. You already you got the call to action, so I hope you'll take action on what we've discussed here today. With that, we'll sign on out of here. A reminder to train right, train often, and train safe so you can fight hard, fight fast, and fight true. Take care. Awesome. Those of you, oh, snap. I knew I was forgetting something. I was going to announce a giveaway winner. I will go ahead and announce it now. It won't. I'm not going to even bother inserting it into the finished podcast audio because I don't know. I'm just whoever's the winner. I'm going to send them an email and let them know. But so the last giveaway we had going on was for a free month of Laser X. So free month of Laser X. And let's see here. I'm going to pick that winner right now, which is Scott. First name is Scott. Last name starts with D. And he has in his email address PSDB. That should give him a clue. If he's viewing live right now, then Scott will be cheering. But otherwise, Scott will get an email from me and notifying him he's a winner of the Laser X app. Free month. And then, guys, a little tease of the newest or latest raffle or giveaway that'll be going on starting as of today. It started a few hours ago. Is we are going to be giving away a SWAT T tourniquet. That's awesome. So make sure you get signed up at concealedcarry.com/podcast prize. You'll see the latest giveaway. You can get signed up right there for a chance to win a free SWAT T tourniquet. It's like a $16.99 $16.99 value. So very cool. So with that, we'll sign on out of the live broadcast here. Thanks for being with us, guys. Appreciate all the comments, questions, and everything that you do that supports us here. So see you later. We'll see you, Brian.